This episode is brought to you by CBUSA. For nearly 2 decades, CBUSA has been helping independent home builders better their businesses, and it all began with a group of industry leaders just like you looking to do just that. As the nation's largest group purchasing organization in the residential construction industry, they're able to bring home builders together to compete, frankly, on a national scale. By getting builders to group together, you're creating a buyer group that is now going to help you negotiate better deals and better rebates, even nationally. If you're a local builder here in Minnesota, you're in luck because CBUSA is proud to announce that in Q1 of 24, they're coming to Minneapolis. So if you'd like to know more about this journey and be part of the builders here that are going to have advantages being the first ones in, please reach out to Ryan Lipchek from CBUSA. You can also listen to his story on episode 26 of The Curious Builder. Lake Society magazine is Minneapolis' premier target market boutique lifestyle and design publication. It embodies the unique lifestyles and design of the Minneapolis City Lakes neighborhoods. From Lake of the Isles to Lake Harriet, it showcases the best in local design projects by both premier builders, architects, and interior designers in this area. Lake Society magazine has the look and feel of a national publication with glossy covers, high-end finishes. It's mailed directly to upper bracket single-family homeowners in the City Lakes area, and it's the perfect local coffee tabletop publication. Subscriptions can also be available through the website lakesocietymagazine.com. Additionally, publisher and founder Karen Steckel has over 27 years in the local magazine publishing industry and has a passion for high-end photography and quality graphics. Her commitment to quality, visual simplicity, and beauty are strongly reflected in her beautiful Lake Society magazine.
The industrial process is used for something that needs to be high quality. It's like that is a guarantee in itself. And what is important to note is that every single kitchen, the 13 to 15,000 kitchens that go through the factory every year, every single one is custom designed. There's nothing stock. That your kitchen is in piles of wood, essentially piles of veneers before it's ordered. So it's actually custom made every single time, but it's just a more industrial process of how it's made.
Okay, welcome to the Curious Builder podcast. I'm Mark Williams, your host. Today I'm joined with Ville Kämäräinen. I butchered that. How can you pronounce your name for me?
Kämäräinen.
Man, that's a good one. We have a local Finn here with Puustelli cabinets. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
So we met probably 4 or 5 months ago. I got a tour in your Edina showroom. I was really impressed and wanted to bring you on and tell a little bit about your story. So I guess let's start there. Let's tell us a little bit about Puustelli cabinets and their journey here from Finland to Minnesota.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Puustelli has been here since 2016. And so what does it make 7 years about? And Puustelli itself, the mother company, is from 1920s, so 103-year-old company, and still has that plat where there is an old brick chimney and railroad tracks running into the factory building, and then you get inside and it's an all modern setup, but basically 2 stories, one of the mother company and that with over 100 years of history, and then this setup here, which is now on the 7th year, I think.
What city is it in Finland?
It's Harjavalta, and you get a question mark look even on Finnish people's faces. So
don't be surprised. Don't feel bad that I don't know where that is.
So southwest.
Okay. Well, excellent.
Yeah, close to the coast.
So they've been around for 100 years, and you've been in the United States for just 7, or were you shipping stuff through a distributor prior to that?
The first installation was right around 16, 17. So that was the first Puustelli kitchen installed in the States.
Okay. And why, I have some suspicions, just Minnesotan with our ties to Scandinavian countries, Finland and Norway and Sweden in general with a lot of our population, but why Minnesota and, why here when you guys decided to branch to the United States?
I think that's where we connect. So Minnesota's things like, why Minnesota? And then you ask Californians and they're like, why not?
Right.
So like, why not Minnesota? Would be the short answer. The actual answer is that there was an au pair. Anna Joona was an au pair here, and then she was at least still married to a Puustelli entrepreneur, Mikko Jola, and then she, after au pair year, her host family visited them in Finland, and they looked at their kitchen. They're like, we want one of these to our home in America. And Mikko, being a little bit optimistic, he's like, let's do that. So that's how it started. And then Mikko went to the factory, to the CEO, and told him that we got to start installing in the States.
Oh, that's a great story. I
Yeah.
love that. Wow. What year would that have been roughly? Was that prior, obviously, just
Yeah,
a few years
just a
before
little before,
2016? Okay. Amazing. What city was she in here in Minnesota?
She was, I actually don't know exactly.
Okay, sure.
The first operations were in Edina,
Yep.
where we're back to now.
Okay. That would make sense. So you guys decided to move over here. You came in 2016. Walk us a little bit through. I think you're the first person that we've had on the podcast that, we have international connections and starting a new business. A lot of the people that we've had on, obviously talk about their story of entrepreneurship. Yours is really unique in the fact that you obviously have a 100-year-old company, but in some ways it's starting over in the sense that it's creating a new business venture here in the States. Walk us through a little bit of, I guess some of the challenges and your personal involvement. I mean, you're the CEO now, and you've been here the whole time, I would assume?
Actually not. I started, we moved here from Helsinki, Finland to actually Maple Grove, Minnesota initially, summer 2019.
Okay.
So the good timing right before COVID.
Yep.
It was me and my wife and 2 kiddos, and we packed up our life in Finland into 10 suitcases and flew here. And then I just remember 2 vivid memories. One was walking at the airport and trying my pocket and looking for keys, just realizing that, well, we don't have a house, we don't have a car or cars, so I'm not missing any keys. I don't have any keys. And then another one when we got the rental in Maple Grove and then got our kids enrolled in school, and we walked into the yellow school bus, which doesn't exist in Finland. That was a big ride in itself. And then me and my wife would send them off and then join the retirees walking around the ponds of Maple Grove. And actually one of the neighbors came back to us later on. She's like, so you're the young couple that just goes for walks in the mornings? Like, yes, I guess we haven't noticed.
Oh, that's really funny. So at that time, what was set up here in Minnesota? I mean, the shop had already been set up for 4 years at that time, or 3 years, I guess it was. So I assume you started, you were driving into the office as soon as you figured out how to buy a car and all that stuff, right?
Right. So I knew Puustelli. I had scoped them out before we moved here.
So you weren't sent here by them?
No.
Oh.
We just moved here. We had a little bit of a runway to work with, so we just went for walks because we didn't have jobs. We didn't have anything lined up.
Oh, amazing. Okay.
We started getting the house set up and all that, and then I went to a networking, actually Finnish American Chamber of Commerce event, and the entrepreneur was there. And so I went with Mikko. I had some interviews ongoing. But then I think what got Mikko's attention is that I had been working for a fast-growing Finnish company that was growing from Finland to all the Nordic countries. And in the time I was there, it went from 50 to 500 people, about $120 million in revenue now. So we're kind of thinking that there's probably some applicable knowledge hopefully came from that ride. And then long story short, that's when we ended up joining paths, and I started as a CEO. So that was November 2019 when I started.
Right, and then COVID hit.
Yeah.
We'll get into that in a minute.
Yep.
Well, tell us a little bit then about, some of the things that makes, and it's funny, I say it differently. So I keep saying Puustelli, and what is the proper pronunciation?
Puustelli.
Puustelli. Wow.
So you say it without any enthusiasm, so it becomes Finnish. And then you kind of sit on the long vowels. You sit on the U, so Puustelli.
Puustelli. All right, I'm going to have to do some Finnish class. It was funny because right before you came on, you were laughing. You're like, so this interview is basically 1 hour of trying to make a Finn talk. That made me laugh so hard.
Yeah, thanks for taking on the challenge.
Yeah, very, very reserved. Oh, you're a great guest. So, just walk us through a little bit of, I was very impressed with the showroom in Edina. It's right off of, was it Highway 170th or somewhere around there?
Yeah, so it's the old Vikings headquarters, seems to be known by everyone. So actually, basically where 494 and 169 meet, it's called the District Edina. And there's a few showrooms there. That's where we are located now.
You guys, I remember seeing, because I live in Minneapolis, you guys used to be in Uptown, right? Was there a short time that you were in Uptown? I remember seeing
5 years.
Okay, I remember the glass buildings right there, kind of on the corner of Calhoun Square, if I recall, as you drive in on Lake Street, right?
Yeah, you're right.
Yep. You guys always had beautiful advertising. And I always thought the showroom, as I just drove by, would always look really attractive. Evidently not enough to attract me to go in, because I never did go in, but
Yeah.
it was very good. So walk us through a little bit about your cabinetry. I mean, most of the cabinetry that I do is, going to be wood created, everything's custom here, made in Minnesota. And so I was really impressed with, the customization of, the product and of the cabinetry, and just learning, we'll talk a little bit about kind of the eco center, just your sustainability that the company's kind of centered around. And so I guess tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah. I remember the visit. I actually got your attention when I went to stand on one of the drawers,
Yes.
just to demonstrate, show off the durability and high quality of them. But if you go a little back, if you go to where the company started and kind of like how it evolved into what it is today, is that in the 1920s, it was an operation that was processing wood, lumber, and then went from there to making windows and doors, and then started exporting some high quality products in the 60s. And it was not until 70s when the kitchen cabinetry line started. And to answer the long answer to your question was that it actually filled the void of like big box producers making cabinets that don't actually work in the home. So Puustelli kind of came into with the custom approach, and already then combined some of the industrial ways of doing that, but really being the custom shop for the client. So that's where it started. And then for the past 30 years, Puustelli has been the number one in the home market. And today it is to the point where it's 30% of the new built homes have Puustelli kitchens in them.
In Europe or
30
Finland?
In Finland.
Okay.
And 15% of the remodeled homes. So it's like to the point where the mother company struggles to understand sometimes that, we are not known by anybody in the beginning. Now it's changed somewhat, but anyway, that's where it started. And then about 15 years ago, the management came together and decided to look into the sustainable aspect of it, of making, like knowing that they could make cabinets different and make them better, make them more durable. And about 10 years ago, so we're celebrating our 10th year with the product line we have now. And it was a long journey of doing a lot of R&D and actually pouring millions into it, which is one of those things that most companies didn't take that bet at that point. And retrospectively, you could speculate that was that the bleeding edge or leading edge, and I could maybe say that was maybe on the bleeding side at that point, to today being in a position where we have been showcased by many magazines because there's novelty to it. It's actually built different. But so the long answer to the differentiation, actually, it kind of have to start with the factory. So the factory itself is, it's on a track to become carbon neutral by 2035. So there's an ambitious goal for a process that actually uses a lot of energy, for instance. And then if you think about buying a Puustelli product, you know that you're buying something that is not made in a sweatshop. It's like the factory itself has 3 different ISO certifications. So why is it important? Is that there's 3. One is for quality. One is separately for environmental quality, and third is just the looking after the employees, so the occupational health and safety. So that's the workplace. That's where the cabinets are made. It's a almost dust-free environment. It's automated. Yet it's like the business school taught the word like mass customization. The mass doesn't sound so great, but what is mass produced is something that is always the same. Now, each product actually has unique design to your space. It has your unique selection of doors, pulls, everything. And then the actual wood door is inspected and actually made with, pair of hands and someone actually inspecting it, making sure that it looks as it needs to. and that we can give the warranty it needs to have.
You know, it's interesting. I use obviously a lot of products for a lot of different things in a custom home. Recently, I've done several factory tours in different window companies, and now you're telling me, seeing manufacturing at a large scale, I had preconceived notions that, everything would be stamped out in a big machine. But every factory tour I've done has an incredible amount of people, and there's actually way more hands on a product than I would have thought. And I think some people would maybe say, oh, that's not efficient enough, we need to be better. But I took it as I'm really impressed at the level of craftsmanship that goes into the windows or the cabinets that you're talking about. So I think sometimes, and you correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like, when we're mass producing something, you're just talking about a large amount of quantity to be efficient, to increase your value, but that doesn't necessarily diminish its quality. I mean, would you say that's a fair statement?
Yeah, that's a very good one. And the industrial process is used for something that needs to be high quality. It's like that is a guarantee in itself that there is no material issues or any of that, but like it's a combination of both. And what is important to note is that every single kitchen, the 13 to 15,000 kitchens that go through the factory every year, every single one is custom designed. There's nothing stock. That your kitchen is in piles of wood, essentially piles of veneers before it's ordered. So it's actually custom made every single time, but it's just a more industrial process of how it's made.
I mean, I just took a tour of Pella Windows and Doors down in Pella, Iowa, and they had the same deal. They'll stock, common parts, but until they actually get the order of it, then they just take those parts that they've already assembled or, pre-cut, if you will, to increase efficiency, right? But it's still, each window is made to suit to every, whatever my custom dimension is. They're, again, just bringing efficiency. I think we could learn a lot of that, learn a lot of those techniques and apply them to a custom build. I think in Europe in general, they do a better job of systemizing, especially building, let's say, a new custom home, probably because I'm guessing by volume, they're not building nearly as many new homes, would be my guess, as they are in the United States. But we, I think, are really good at stick framing, but we're not very good at, essentially SIP panels and modularizing a way to increase the efficiency of the labor. And I think we're going to have to, considering the labor pool is shrinking, especially in construction. I think the way around that is we're going to have to do a better job of working with systems and using that modern technology to build stuff in factories and warehouses. It's just hard when you do. I think the excuse has always been, at least for me and in Minnesota, that if you're, quote, a high-end builder doing very complicated homes, it's easier just to build it out in the field. And there is some truth to that, but even if you could build 50 to 60% of your home in somewhat of a field adopted assembly, if you will, I think it would greatly improve the efficiency, speed, and price of the home.
I think you nailed it, and I think that whole issue is part of the Puustelli story, is that we actually had to make, and I say we, I wasn't even there at the time, but had to make large investments to create something new and that can be called sustainable. So if you actually dig into the materials, the factory had to work away from formaldehydes. There was an underlying goal of creating something that is not only sustainably made, but also low VOC. So a product that is third-party tested for indoor air quality. And to be able to say that, you actually had to pour millions into it. And the outcome of that, and why it kind of requires that industrial process, is that in order to work with materials, you need volumes. And in our case, if the outcome was something that the sourcing of the materials was investigated and changed so that all the wood products, for instance, come from third-party certified forests. So there's two certifications. There's FSC and PEFC. And if you would dig into those, that guarantees that if a tree is cut, more than one tree is planted, and like that can be, those kitchens, the 13 to 15,000 can be sustainably made. It doesn't take a toll on this planet. So that's one aspect of it. And then what you gain as an individual is that now if you look at what's the low VOC, I'm not an expert in it, but like if you cite EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency.
Nice.
It came out relatively smoothly. So they say that there's about 10 times more VOCs in the inside the buildings than outside. And why is that? It's the material choices we make. And kitchen cabinets, fairly what I said earlier about bleeding edge, has that challenge that there is limited amount of knowledge about that and awareness about kitchen cabinets being also pollutants and like contributing to the bad indoor air quality. So the company went back and basically re-engineered the whole product. There was no really quick, easy fixes. You have to work through all the materials. So the outcome was a bioframe. The frame of the cabinet is supposed to hold the drawers in place and doors in place. So that's what it needs to be good at. That's why I went to stand in the cabinet, just to prove that it does that job well.
It was funny because when I was at your showroom, just for the audience, it was funny because your staff was like, "Uh-oh, here goes Ville again," because clearly you've done that before. But he pulls out this bottom drawer, and one of the things that I had some preconceived notions about the cabinetry, not knowing anything about them, and because I've always been around cabinet makers that build it from scratch right in front of me, and I can see the small warehouse that they're like a one-man manufacturing firm, if you will, and to see how, and it's oddly enough, you guys use Bloom hinges as well.
Right.
So European, are they Austrian, right?
I should be able to answer that.
I think I'm pretty sure they're Austrian. But anyway, so we've got some great European parts even in our cabinets now. And so, but anyway, watching you stand on it was like, and you were like, "Yep, this isn't going anywhere." I mean, you can't do that with just any cabinet, and so that part's obviously impressive. So
yeah, and like you as an individual homeowner get a 30-year warranty on those mechanical parts, which is not always the best argument to bring up because some of our customers, it takes them to a life past their expected lifetime. So
right.
Not ideal. But anyway, the point of it is that when it's built that way, it gives you the good feeling of quality every day when you use it.
Mm-hmm. What percentage, shifting it a little bit from the sustainability, so in Europe you had mentioned, so like in Finland, you're about 15% of the market is buying your cabinetry. In general, Europe, what kind of market share would you guys have?
So we only actively operate and have showrooms in Finland, Sweden, Estonia, and UK, and here.
Oh, okay.
So the rest of it is one-offs, projects. So those are the active markets.
Interesting. So, I mean, Europe is not geographically, obviously, as big as, let's say, the U.S. I mean, obviously, as a whole it is. But so if someone in France wanted some cabinets, they could get them or they couldn't?
It kind of depends. It wouldn't be the most interesting project.
Interesting. So because you guys were so successful, and I feel like as a general culture, Europe seems to be more thoughtful on being sustainable in general than the U.S. is as a whole. Why not continue to expand through Europe, considering that the mindset and would probably be more favorable than the U.S. versus obviously starting in Minnesota? Other than the fact that the au pair wanted it.
Yeah, that's more than $1,000 question right there.
Yeah.
I think the differentiation factor, kind of with my name, there's only probably one Ville Kämäräinen in the whole country. We differentiate greatly in this market. It is an advantage for us. If you go to Europe, there is solutions that are aesthetically very close to us. They wouldn't have the same way of using materials. They wouldn't have the same products. It wouldn't have the same quality. But the competition is different, and I think it also. I think it's also the fact that there happened to be the au pair and the entrepreneur and all that. Like,
I mean,
what's the real story?
Your answer is great. I mean, it was a huge differentiator, right? I mean, if everyone in the U.S. is doing it, within a handful of ways, and you come in with a totally different approach, you're like, wow, you just opened up in a huge market, which obviously the housing market in the United States has to be, I would assume, the largest in the world. I don't know that for a fact, just guessing. Versus basically yours would be.
Yeah, it is the largest. Yep.
It is the largest,
yep.
Which would make sense. But in Europe, that makes total sense to me because, I mean, otherwise you're playing against a fairly even playing field, or at least they have more options. We're here less so if they're looking for, what you guys have to offer.
Yeah.
Interesting. So now that let's bring it to Minnesota and now the U.S. market. In 2016, whether it's revenue or you can just talk about percentages if you don't want to talk about revenue, how much growth have you seen from 2016 to say now roughly in terms of just your growth segment here?
I think we could actually look at kind of the pivots of the company. I think that's one of the great words that Silicon Valley has given us entrepreneurs is that you have to change the direction of the business, and like then you talk about pivoting and you make it sound like it was all controlled and all.
You're just avoiding a giant boulder
right,
rolling
you hold
down the
your
road.
cappuccino and then you talk about pivoting. And those moments for Puustelli were the initial, the success story of making the first installation. That the client is very happy still today after years of using the product. And then Puustelli opened a showroom on Lake Street, and I think that's one of those, when I have listened to other European companies coming here, one of those moments where you expect business to just pick up. And then you invest in the showroom and you realize that, no, it doesn't. Yeah, actually, that sucked all your energy. So the business might actually take
grand opening and nobody comes.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So we actually did get, I wasn't there, so someone else could tell better, but we did get a lot of attention, a lot of good attention. We won the award at the both of the bigger exhibitions here, Home and Garden and Home and Remodeling, and got publicity in the local press, and like that, it was good. The opening in itself was good. Did it bring the business that was maybe expected? Probably not. But then I think the pivot, that was the first pivot, basically opening a really cool showroom, 5 fully functional kitchens, and it's one of the cooler showrooms in town. Now, then the business model at that point was that we are full service remodeler, and the cabinets were kind of a side revenue stream, and that was the model, and that was a way to open the market. But then it wasn't very scalable, so that we went from that to actually scaling down, and literally giving up millions of revenue in the form of remodeling business. So that remodeling business was scaled down.
I didn't know that. So when you guys first started, you were remodeler and you'd use your own cabinetry. Would you also sell cabinets as retail as well? You kind of had 2 businesses going?
No, just one. But we did have a remodeler's license. We did full house remodelings and massive projects.
Wow.
Where the cabinets were a little side stream.
Yeah.
And so it went from that to then the entrepreneur deciding to scale down the remodel business, which is massive. You had to reduce the team. It's hard for you the people you have hired, to let them go because the business model changed. I still think it was the right decision, but a painful one. So that's when I came in 2019, is when that business was scaled down and people were tired because it's a massive shift. And so we started the golden COVID years with fresh new business model, and we made room for builders like you to be able to work with us, because until then we had been basically a competitor.
Interesting.
Because we had the builder license, we could do the whole thing.
That's a tough deal because you're selling a new product and your new builder to town. So you don't, and obviously Minnesota has a lot of remodelers and a lot of builders with a long-standing multi-generational, chain, if you will, where people, that's hard to break into a new market if you have that deep of roots.
Yeah, you can become a mediocre remodeler, but does not sell the cabinets.
Right.
Not in scale.
Yeah.
But it was not to discredit, that was an important path to becoming what we are today. And then so that was another pivot to scale that down. And then now we have opened a partner program, trade program, to make room for that, for both for the business case and change our mindsets to serve that audience. So up to this point, we have now been mainly serving individual consumers. And you sell them a kitchen with a 30-year warranty, when do they buy next time?
Yeah.
It's
a long time,
right.
Unless they sell their home.
Yeah.
I see. So again, that, would you say that's your second pivot? So now you went from being a remodeler that sold cabinets to a pivot where you sold cabinets, and now is your third pivot essentially trying to develop more builder relationships and architect relationships and designer relationships? Is that the third pivot?
Yeah. And I went to a U.S. Green Building Council. That's a big word. A few words. So I went to their event last night, and like they also, same thing that we learned at KBIS this year was that that's one of those indirect audiences that we need to address and talk to more so, and is the architects, designers, and builders, of course. And that's what we're doing now. And then further down the road, we will have a partnership model for someone to actually resell the product, have dealers
around the country.
But we're not there yet. Yeah.
Yeah.
And we have done individual projects in more than 10 states now.
Okay.
But it's, yeah.
Do you guys install your own cabinetry as well?
Yeah.
Okay, so you obviously, if it's down, we're in Minnesota, someone in Texas wants a cabinet, you'll fly a team down, drive a team down, or you'll do it. Obviously, has to reflect in the price too, so that becomes a challenge, I'm guessing.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, and like transportation, it's one of those maybe misunderstandings, kind of like the custom aspect of it. We manufacture them different, but it's fully custom to every single project. One of those things is that transportation, well, does it become costly? Just a number game here. If last container was about a little over $5,000 to bring here. You can have 5 kitchens that are pre-assembled in that one container. So now you paid a little over, let's say, $1,000 for the transport from the factory in a container that was never open until it was received here. So a very controlled environment all the way to Edina, Minnesota.
Yep.
So that's one of those things that it doesn't necessarily cost more than sending something from Tennessee. It might be slightly more, but compared to the project, everything in it might come with countertops in the same shipment. It's not that big of a difference.
Interesting. This episode is brought to you by Pella Northland. For 19.5 years, I've been building homes, and 95% of all of my homes have used Pella windows. I couldn't be happier to call them a partner in our builds and our remodels. Whether you're an architect, a designer, or a remodeler, I'd highly recommend Pella windows. They can fit old homes, new homes, reclaimed, commercial, and really everything in between. Pella is a company that we trust and that we recommend to our clients. Additionally, in management, Peter and Ed have just been absolute fantastic people to work with, as well as mentors to me personally. So when it comes time to look for a window, I'd highly recommend Pella windows. Find more at pellanorthland.com. Also, if you're interested, you can hear episode 1 where I interview Peter and Ed together for a great listen on business and Pella windows. This episode is brought to you by Adaptive, the software for builders that automates draws, budgets, and bookkeeping with AI. For over a year now, I've been partnered with Adaptive, and they've just been an amazing game changer in terms of efficiency in our time and all our bookkeeping. From the time we get an invoice, we import it into their system. The AI codes it, cost codes it, job codes it. All we have to do is review it, pass it through the people internally in the office, all digitally, and then it gets approved and paid all via ACH. It's becoming extremely fast and saving us countless hours a day and a week. When it comes to draws, all of our budgets now are set in Adaptive as well. So now when we cost code against the draws, we can do our change orders, and then with a click of a button, we can submit these draws to our title companies or to our homeowners for faster payment. If you're looking to save time, and if you're looking to be accurate, I highly recommend Adaptive. Additionally, if you'd like to listen to one of their founders share the story of Adaptive, you can listen to episode number 15 on the Curious Builder podcast. How right now, from a percentage split, how much of your business or retail sales would be direct to consumer versus to a builder or architect?
So if I had to throw the parity or 80-20 at it, it would be 80% direct to consumer.
Yep.
Where the model is such that we provide the design, the cabinetry, countertops, and the installation, and then there's a remodeler partner that gets the space ready for us.
Right.
And the rest of it is working with builders. Mm-hmm. And that is now already shifting when you have introduced the new model to work with the partners.
Right. How big is your current team right now in the cities in terms of employees?
There's 9 of us.
Yep. And I assume, do you have, from a sales standpoint, I met some of your staff, obviously, when I was in the showroom. Is one of your main things to try to invite people, obviously, into the showroom? How often are you, let's say, going out and trying to meet, kind of a lunch and greet with, architects or builders or designers? Or what have you found to be the best way to build a relationship? Because as you know, it is a relationship that takes some time to develop. It's probably not just a call and say, hey, would you like to buy our cabinets? Walk us through a little bit of how, not only you, but in general, those listening that have, let's say, a manufacturing business, just some ways and tips that work to, expand that growth.
We love to bring people to our showroom because it's like you learn something when you see, like you actually get to try and feel the product, what it feels like, get the quality feeling of it, get some visuals, what are the aesthetics. So that's one of the primary forms of doing that. And then obviously we're active with going to different events, but primarily we try to bring people to our showroom, and then have had some themed talks, invite some specialists, pros from the field to our showroom, have a little panel, because it's a cozy environment. It's your kitchen.
Yep.
So those are
when
some of the
I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we've met in person about 3 times. I know the first time I think was at the members only event that Housing First Minnesota put on, and then the second was at our first live event for the Curious Builder,
Right.
and then obviously your trip to your showroom. But it was interesting to me. You're speaking about the eco stuff. Jackson Schwartz from Hennepin made at the live event, kind of how you mentioned by 2035, you guys want to be carbon zero, at the factory. Is that right? Mm-hmm. And it was just kind of interesting, even here in Minnesota, how there's certain companies, Hennepin made had some, I think they had like 6 different metrics they were trying to reach. And it was to inspire their employees. It wasn't even just the story. They really believed in the sustainable model. And I think that is definitely the younger generation is thinking much more about it than I would say the generation of builders and businesses, that were here before us. And so it's encouraging to see that. And then of course the state has, guidelines and tries to encourage it. I think the thing that's always difficult about that is how do you balance sustainability with price? Because, we always are of course concerned about, value. And I think if you say a value statement, it'd be easy to talk about sustainability, how there's a lot of value there for future. If you talk about cost, I often feel like cost and value are totally different metrics. And even when I had a conversation today on a site walk with a couple that we were interviewing for, and I was trying to explain to them different tiers of architecture and home design, and same deal with builders, just like a car, like any other thing, there's so many different tiers, and I have to understand what the client values before I can really see if our structure aligns with their value statement. So
Right. And I think the quality answers, like the lifetime, the longevity of the product answers partially that question. We actually have one company that is using our cabinets for affordable living and affordable housing. And they chose us primarily because of the quality aspect of it, and that in turn reducing their cost long term. But they had to give it a little bit more of a timeline. And then they're thinking, it was interesting to hear it with their own words, is that now that we have, it's hundreds of units that they'll be installing that in the state of California. So now that you have a kitchen that you have installed once, if something breaks, you change a component, you don't change the whole kitchen. So that was part of their value, that they signed the product and how it's built so that you can actually save money in a rental setting.
My next question was going to be about commercials and apartments, because I have to believe on an apartment building over a condo building, that would be a genius move, especially as there can't be too many cabinet companies out there is there any that do a 30-year warranty?
I haven't seen any, but it doesn't mean that there isn't any.
Sure. I think that's a CEO answer right there. That's a veteran move right there from Finland. But genius really, because not only have you spent more money in the front end, but yeah, if you know that you have to redo and update your apartments, I don't know, they must have a schedule saying that, hey, the average home needs to, new paint, new cabinets, whatever it is. And if they can extend that out, now the life cycle, if that's going to make a lot more sense, that makes sense to me. Do you find that you have a lot of commercial interest?
We actually are not we're not actively seeking for them. There is interest, but our challenge is that it's spread across the 50 states. We just had an inquiry from Washington, D.C., and it was a hotel building, and they wanted our cabinets for it. They had scoped out 3 companies that they could find that could fit the spec that was required by the investor. We looked at it. We turned it down. We turned it down twice because we're basically not ready to deliver at that point. We have done them, though. So like Modi Apartments, MODI, right in Uptown. They have our kitchens they're called luxury apartments. And it's funny, I met with the investor, and it was a few years after they have been installed, and they're like, you talked about that promise that like if there's water damage, your cabinet, the frames will actually take it. That's no problem. They're not going to suck in the water. They're bioframes and they're built that way. And we ended up testing that promise, and
unintentionally testing it,
right? So, and they're like, and you're true to your word. They took that water damage and we're fine. So
interesting. I wonder if they're going to come up. Well, I guess they do LVT. I was thinking about, because every once in a while, every builder, if they've been in business long enough, has seen a dishwasher likely fail or back up or whatever happen, and then the water will come out underneath the pan. It'll spread to your wood floor. Your wood floor expands, and before you know it, you've got to rip out some wood floor because wood is porous. I was just thinking, could you come up with a what you call it, bioframe, so a bio wood floor? But I guess in some ways they have that LVT and other synthetic products. I just like the way the natural wood looks better for a wood floor application anyway.
Well, the problem itself is solved with Puustelli cabinets in Finland and in the European market in a way that there is a plastic piece on the dishwasher,
yep.
and then there's a little alarm. There's
Yep.
two different kinds of alarms. One is just a voice that.
We've talked about doing custom. I know some high-end builders will do like a custom metal tin underneath it, like a disaster pan, and we've done plastic ones under like washing machines.
Right.
It's not super common for dishwashers, but anyway, I'll have to. It actually was on my to-do list last year. It looks like it's going to go back on the list for this year to look back into that. What, from a business standpoint, so you're receiving everything into a warehouse in Edina as well, because you have your showroom, and I think you mentioned you have a warehouse nearby.
You're right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Was that one of the primary reasons to move out of Uptown, was to get some more storage space?
That was one of them. So we had a 5 + 5 year lease, and then we had, well, that's a story too. Greg from Habitation Furnishing and Design walked into our Christmas party, and he's like, I know you guys have the coolest showroom in town, but I think we should move. We're like, we're not moving.
Yeah.
But we are actually negotiating the 5-year extension. So what do we have? What have we got? And he's like, well, we have a cool new District Edina showroom space you guys should move to. We're like, no, we're not moving. But long story short, we ended up moving.
How did he convince you?
The space was easier for parking. The building is really cool. The idea of having multiple showrooms under one roof was good. Location is great. It's an Edina address, but not only that, it is with 494, 169. It's easy for the clients to come to. And then a lot of good shared spaces. So that was handy. And then we ended up finding the warehouse and storage location right next door, and that's one of the other pivots. So what we have done now is that since we have started small scale assembly there, and we're now building what we call an express line. So since we have the bioframe slides boxes, they're standard in all. Like we use standard sizes. Then when we design, we just decide what size do we use for each cabinet. So now we have basically everything except for doors in the Edina warehouse. So if we needed we could do a 6-week turnaround time for a whole project. So if you are a builder that has a quick need, that someone is, or if it's a realtor that there's a house being sold and bought, and there's a time crunch for someone to move in, we can turn it around with 6 weeks. And what we do is that we get everything else from the warehouse and then to send the doors, either have the doors made locally or send them from the factory. So that's impressive for, custom, cabinetry to be turned in 6 weeks like that. And on top of it, you don't have to do any sort of on-site painting, right? So you're saving all the time there as well. You're correct. You're correct. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's a good idea. Obviously everyone experienced issues during COVID. How did that, you had mentioned the container box was 5,000. What during the height of the pandemic, what were some of your freight charges like per crate? And did that completely mess up your pricing model, or you had to continually readjust it every month?
Yeah, that's a good question. So the same metric, it was a little over 12 grand.
Yeah.
But we have a big factory. What we actually ended up riding on a flat price throughout COVID. So factory lagged with updating their, so we pay a percentage for them. So we ended up paying basically the same price. Customers didn't actually see the increase in freight cost because it was absorbed primarily by the factory because we had just terms in place for paying for the, and
So you had some locked contracts that you couldn't change on the back end?
yeah, basically it was with our own factory. So we just didn't have the inflated costs show through all the way to our consumer end. So yeah, it helped us.
So from a, walk me through the next, what does the next couple of years look like in terms of, where are you seeing the best growth for either awareness, or is it more of a slow, step by step? I mean, it seems like you're starting to get some nationwide interest. I mean, I like the idea that you turned down the hotel twice. I guess, where do you see the company 3 years from now and even 5 years from now in terms of a growth model here in Minnesota, and then possibly even, branching out into other parts of the country?
Right. So if you look at the whole Puustelli group, what its vision is and what it wants to become and be is the most responsible provider, cabinet provider in the chosen markets, and that meaning that you give the consumer the choice of the option of making a sustainable choice. So that's here too. We want to be that responsible entity here, and then geographically, we see demand pockets. The whole state of California is big, and it's the size of France, so it should be big too. But we see also good amount of demand and like very good alignment with what we offer. Same from the East Coast, and then there's states like Florida is actually, I wouldn't have bet on that, but
I mean, think of it. You mentioned about the water. I mean, between the hurricanes and the humidity, you have some crazy, obviously moisture issues down in Florida in general. I have to imagine your cabinetry would do amazing down there.
That's actually come through. Yeah, we have actually seen that demand in that particular comment. That's a good point. And then there's states like Colorado. We have done first projects there, and then of course the surrounding states. So the growth is primarily in those areas where we clearly see the demand, and it's easy to, like, we basically serve the clients that come from out of state, the ones that are most active, what we see the best fit, that basically these people would be fun to work with.
Right.
And that's kind of
California obviously has always pushed a lot of climate change just of their population, and from, I'm not from California, but just, reading the news like a normal person, I suspect that, in Washington and Oregon, I mean, that whole West Coast band would be a good spot. I mean, would California be the next spot to open a spot just based on, demographics plus the population alone? It seems kind of like almost like a no-brainer, right? I mean, their population is huge.
Yeah, let's say that's what we're scoping very thoroughly right now.
Okay. And I've never expanded a company outside of the state. What is entailed in actually doing some of the research? I think that'd be sort of interesting to hear, like from a mindset, like what kind of market, do you pay a third party to do market research? Are you reaching out to other, not cabinet shops, but other builders, like how does one go about understanding? And this could be applicable to, let's say I'm going to build in another city, but in this case, you're building another state. I'm just kind of curious about the mindset of how you go about even doing that.
That's a good question too. And I think COVID actually changed some of the purchasing behavior. So all of a sudden people are ready to buy kitchens without seeing anyone or anything in person. And that a little bit threw us off too. It's like, you serious? But if you're serious, we'll do it.
Sure. That's a great answer, because we got so used to being at home and locked in and everything was done remotely that the days of actually having to go to a showroom or see a model home in person was sort of weird. It was sort of trained out of us. Is that kind of what you're saying? Like people are much more accepting, like, hey, okay, you can build it online. Sure. Great. When can you show up and do it?
Yeah. And to the point where we just installed a project where it was a Minnesota client a few miles from the showroom, didn't bother to come visit us. Because
that's amazing.
There's enough of trust. We brought the samples home. So the sale was done remotely. And that being the half the point is that sales can be done remotely. Install has to be local. Yeah. And so does remodel. So we have to be able to combine the sale and design aspect of it, the remodel aspect of it, if it's a remodel project. New builds are easier. And then the install. So essentially, the remodel business is local, and that's what we need to be able to build. And how that's built in the other countries is that there is local representation. It's an entrepreneur running their own show, and they take care of the sale and install. Well, sales, design, delivery, install, the whole thing. So it'll be local, and how the model exactly is, it's the closest we're now is a dealership model where the dealer would take care of both the sales and design aspect of it and then the install, and then get the remodel business on top of that.
So other than location, you're trying to find what city would be the best hotbed. Going back to the original question, exactly how are you doing? How do you do the research of knowing, like, A, what state to pick, number one, and then number two, what city do you even open into? Like, what has to go into kind of queuing these things up?
Multiple layers. One is, and what's a big one, is the sustainability aspect. So what's the awareness? What's customers' interest and willingness to pay? And maybe need to elaborate on that a little bit. So we're at about custom cabinet price range, roughly speaking. And so you're not necessarily paying a massive premium to get something that has that promise of low VOC, sustainability, all that. So that's roughly where we're at. But can I go back to the question itself?
Yeah, just basically, if you're franchising or expanding it to another state, what are some of the things that you have to do? You know, if I was going to, let's say, open up a custom home company in Sacramento, California, you know, I don't know why I picked that. It just came to mind. So, you know, I would want to know, like, hey, how many homes are being built a year? You know, I'd probably call 4 or 5 of the lumber yards. I'd probably make a visit out there and go see what kind of homes are being built. I'm just kind of curious, as a cabinet shop, how are you getting, like, what actually says, you know what, we're moving to this state? Because, like, I mean, frankly, from a market research standpoint, it took us 2 minutes to get to the fact that I think California is a good spot. So,
right,
okay, now where in California do you go? Do you do more than one? Do you kind of double down? I'm just curious, like, you know, they have this phrase, right, where the rubber meets the road. You know, what is the next step? Like, what is preventing you from going to California? What's the next steps? And what helped you get either, you know, from Puustelli in Finland to help with that? Or is that really your domain as being, you know, essentially the CEO of the United States?
Yeah, the process is led by us. And the first question, that what are those kind of the research layers?
Yeah.
One of them is simply the demand that we see, because if you take any half-year period, we get demand from about 20, 30 different states. So we have the history, we have the 7 years of cumulative data of where the demand comes from, without us just trying to block, not be seen in those states, but still there's demand. Then we can look at different states with their environmental consciousness, basically, and then low VOC is one of those things that a lot of builders are starting to hear now, from what we hear from them. And low VOC, in general, the awareness for the indoor air quality, what we talked about earlier about, you know, indoor air having the 10 times more VOCs than outside air, and that's because of how we built them. So that's something that we see, that demand. Then there is aspects that we look at, which is the logistics of it. Is it, like, if you look at it, current projects, is it easy to get to? But then, like, where to expand, the economic power of that region is one factor. And if you look at just different, like LA in California is not just LA, there's many different areas that you can have multiple showrooms in. So there's plenty of, it's like some of the areas are no-brainers. Like, we can exhaust the analysis of it, but we can see that there's plenty of demand.
Right. So then when, I guess, going back to my earlier question, is it going to happen in the next 3 years, 5 years? What would be the catalyst of events that would say we're going there?
So the simplest form is what we're doing now in California, that we're just training an installer.
Okay.
Because we can sell, we have the demand, we can sell remotely, we need someone to install them, so we're training an installer. So that's the first and easiest form of local establishment.
Yep. All right. That makes a ton of sense. One thing that we had talked about, I think a week or two ago, just because I'm struggling with it, I think every business owner struggles with cash flow management. It's always kind of interesting to hear that you're not alone on an island, that everyone struggles with the same thing. I had a meeting today with our account team, and, we do cost plus accounting, with our clients. So we're always in arrears, meaning we're always behind billing. And so it's a struggle, because it's like, you look at your P&L statement and you're like, well, actually we have more money than, we're doing well. But then you look at your cash flow and you look at your bank account and you're like, why do I feel like a pauper? In a commercial setting, you're a bigger company than us. How do you guys manage cash flow, or what are some things that you've seen to kind of help navigate those waters? Because I think it appeals to, regardless of what you do for business, everyone can relate to that.
I actually thought about it after our conversation. In my previous role, I was one of the jobs I had multiple jobs in that about 10-year period that I was working with the company. But one of the roles, and the last role that I was in, I was a director of a business unit that the size of it was 26 million euros, about $30 million in annual revenue. And it was the Stockholm area, and in the hospitality setting, we had bought some businesses there. And I was running that business unit, and I was thinking that what was the biggest change when I started in this role was actually exactly that. So I was running the business with kind of the metrics of the conventional metrics of revenue or profitability, and then the industry specific metrics of ADRs and the hospitality. You have to look how many rooms are sold and occupancy rates, and so you lead it with metrics. And hop into the CEO shoes. What is that? What's your primary metric? It's the cash flow, and I think it is also very unique in this industry. Is that if we sold hotel nights, your stay the individual transaction might have been $100, and there's thousands after thousands of those. So there is that kind of and the money comes in right away. Or if you look at insurance, you give them the money and don't even know if you're ever going to use any services.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So they get the money up front. In this industry, you're at the back end, and you still might take the risk of someone not paying your bill or delaying the payment. So I think our industry is unfortunately one of the tough ones. And then it's us too, that if you look at the cabinetry side of it, if you had a project that was, a house with cabinets, countertops, install everything, let's say that it was a $40,000 project. Now, there might be a little side comment that comes from the sales designer's mouth that, okay, this project was delayed by a month. It's like that cash was also just delayed by a month.
Yep.
So that is what we work with too, and it probably quite conventional ways of working with it. You have your payment terms and credit line and those things that you can build into it, but it is primarily just keeping the focus on the sales front of things. And
so I talked to a company, and actually I will refrain from saying their name. They've been on the podcast before, but I think I can share the story. And it was really that during the pandemic, their lead times got so far out. So this particular product was 20 to 30 weeks out, and it came early in the build. And so the consequence was, as builders like myself, as soon as we signed a contract, even before the permit was pulled, we would order this product. And knowing that I wanted it to be sitting in their warehouse versus my house being stalled out because I couldn't get it. Well, then projects would be delayed, or permits would be delayed. And so this company was, sitting on, I'm sure they're not alone in this, we're sitting on millions of dollars of accounts receivable that I'm sure they had to pay their parent company on their terms, but they couldn't collect the cash until delivery. And it was a major problem. I mean, they ended up buying warehouses to store all this stuff. And, I don't have to deal with that, but it was it kind of was an eye-opening experience. I think so many people learned really very painful cash flow lessons during the pandemic, especially if you were a supplier.
Yeah. I think our backbone, which we probably don't remember to be grateful enough of, is the punctuality of the factory. Anything we order goes through in 4 to 5 weeks, and we can count on that. We have learned to count on it coming through our own pipeline in a very controlled manner, so we can count on being able to deliver. Of course, there is the shipping component of it, but we have learned to work with that. We have the warehouse where we can store the stuff. So I think that's one of those things that we're not relying on someone else's delivery. We have a controlled chain, and it helps with the cash as well, because we know that, okay, this is when we can sign the contract. We know that we can count on the factory to make the products we need. And then the rest of the process, like when the products are delivered here in a sealed container, we can receive it and then schedule the install. So we're fortunate in that we have a controlled environment for our own things. It doesn't make everything peachy for the cash flow management, but it does help.
Yeah, I can imagine. Plus, you have reliable partners because it's in everyone's best interest.
Right.
Yeah, because like you said, you have a vertical, I guess, what is it called? Vertical supply chain management, but you're all basically owned by the same company.
Right.
Is, out of curiosity, is Puustelli Cabinets here in Minneapolis, are they owned by Finland, or is it like a franchise or its own entity here?
So at this point, it's a separately owned business entity.
Yep.
And very close ties.
Okay. Yep.
Group.
I don't know much about it from the standpoint. Is that because it's the United States and a parent company is in another country in Finland, or that was just a decision that made the most sense for them? Because you had an entrepreneur, it was Mikko, right? So
Yep.
it was basically, is he still here? And
Yep.
is he
Yep.
still involved with the company?
Yep.
Okay.
Both Mikko and Anna, yeah.
Okay. How often do you see him, or is he in the office
Every
regularly?
week for sure.
Yeah.
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 Yeah, and like that's, there's basically two separate entities. One is the factory, and then the other is the sales portion of the business. So that's how the Puustelli business is structured in other countries as well. That the factory is separate from the sales entities. However, they're as close together as they can be without being in the same books.
Right. Okay, that makes sense. Maybe just the last thing here, we'll kind of transition to just a few personal things about you, just because it's always kind of interesting to see how business owners operate. But Minnesota has obviously a lot of Scandinavian roots. I don't think I have any Finnish. I'm mostly Swedish, and Norwegian, and then a bunch of other things, but primarily those. Where I'm going with this question is, do you find that the Finnish population in Minnesota is really excited, when they find out that they've got a Finnish cabinet company? Do you find that you have a lot of Finns that reach out to you in particular because it feels like either home or it feels like a connection that they can relate to?
Yeah, it is a very, it's a community that knows each other. And there's actually a lot of Finns that have been in interesting roles here. So I think we could safely say that Minnesotans know us. Like Finnish Minnesotans know us. But then there has been the Osmo Vanska was conducting the Minnesota Orchestra. There's been Saku Koivu's captain for a while. There's a lot of that, and we're, if Finns act like they're not proud, we're incredibly proud of, the Finns that are seen here.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I might have forgotten your question.
No, you got it. Just that there's a lot of enthusiasm for home. I would be too. Oddly enough, this is funny because I remember having I run sometimes in the wintertime, and I had this really cool white Nordic ski hat because I always see all the Finns just dominating like the biathlon, the biathlon and other Olympic skiing Nordic events. But anyway, your flag is amazing, right? It's the Blue Cross, and I remember liking it, but I'd always wear it, and because I obviously look Scandinavian a little bit, people would always ask if I was Finnish because I had the Finnish flag, and I'm like, no, I love this hat, but I'm actually Norwegian and Swedish. Yeah. And I like their hats too, but I just happen to like that white hat. But I sometimes think I'm an adopted Finn.
Yeah. If you want to win the Nordic skiing, you got to have the Norwegian hat, unfortunately. But
they're pretty good.
Yeah.
Well, although we got Jessie Diggins in Stillwater, Minnesota.
She's amazing, yeah.
She's incredible.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. And I think to your point about the Minnesota and the Finnish connection, I think that's living its renaissance right now, and the U.S.-Finnish connection overall. Finland is the size of Minnesota. And then if you look at just the fact that Governor Walz just made the trip with a delegation to Finland, it's not every governor that does that. That was great. But there's Minnesota is one of the chosen 6 states that Finland has made a strategic partnership with So that's like Minnesota-Finland connection. Now, just maybe a week or two ago, both the Biden and Harris administration they both actually, Biden and Harris separately talked about Nokia, the Finnish company that is just now expanding here, building high-speed internet for the Biden-Harris administration, one of the big programs. So there's a lot of things going on. Finns has bought F-35s, a lot of them. There's a lot of things going on bilaterally right now. U.S. just became the biggest trading partner for Finland. That's first time in history.
Oh, that's really cool.
Yeah, so there's lots going on, and I'm in the Finnish American Chamber of Commerce, the volunteer hours, trying to help build that bridge. So,
well, and I think I had mentioned to you, we're working with a Finnish hockey player here on a remodel, and then I'm really big sauna enthusiast, and so my world has exploded the last couple of years in talking with Finns and their saunas, and so I think now between Puustelli cabinets and and all the different kinds of sauna elements, I'm definitely getting an exposure to Finland. Now I think the next thing is I need to go to Finland and do a little tour. I've been to other parts of northeastern Europe, but I've not been to Finland. So.
Yeah, I'd love to set up a tour for you. And
that would be amazing.
Yeah. Yeah,
I think I might actually get my wife to go on one. The Curious Builder travels to Finland. We might that would be a there you go, business write off.
Sounds good. Sounds good.
Well, as we come in here for the close, tell us a few personal things. What do you like to do for fun, or how do you unwind when you're not creating a Finnish cabinet empire?
Yeah, I actually didn't necessarily prepare for the question, but I do like sports, like you do too. We share that. I do like music. Playing some music, so you might find me playing guitar. Just started playing violin.
Oh, nice.
Who starts violin at the age of 40?
I think that's really cool. You got to stay curious. How?
I thought about that.
Yeah,
yeah.
I mean that it keeps you young. How old are your children now?
They're 10 and 13.
Okay. Are they interested in music as well?
Yeah,
yeah.
And like how much of that is forced down their throats? No, I actually think they're actually interested, but
yeah. My daughter, she's 7. She told me the other day she wanted to do the violin. I was like, I can play the piano a little bit. Let's start with the piano first. See if you like that before we go down the violin road.
Yeah, it's one of the challenging ones that you have to do a little bit of work to get to enjoy it.
Right. Oh, interesting. So where can our listeners find you if they want to reach out to you and they're interested in your company and what you have to offer?
So puustelliusa.com. Mm-hmm. There's 2 U's after the P. That's the website. And then we are on Instagram. You can find it if you search with Puustelli USA. Same with Facebook. And you can find us, of course, on YouTube as well. But the following there isn't the greatest. But yeah, Instagram and Facebook are the main channels. There's something on LinkedIn.
Okay. Yeah, and we'll have everything tagged in the show notes as well. And thank you again for coming on The Curious Builder. And for everyone listening, if you want to reach out, please rate and review the show. And I can always hook you up directly with Ville. And thanks again for coming on.
Thanks for having me. And I think you managed to get a Finn to talk, so it's a success in itself.
Wonderful. Well, how do you say thank you in Finnish?
Kiitos.
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 Yep.
All right. Kiitos.
Kiitos.
Signing off.
Bye.
Kiitos. Thanks for listening to the Curious Builder podcast. If you like what you listen to, please give us a 5-star rating and write us a review. It really means a lot. It's a great way for us to just understand what you like about the podcast and what we can keep doing. So like and review, and please share with your friends and family. Find out more at curiousbuilderpodcast.com.